What if the urge to have more isn't really freedom, but a carefully disguised trap? Have you ever wondered if you actually choose what you want, or if someone or something already made that decision for you long before you even thought you were choosing? You look around and see people hustling, shopping, collecting, competing, always chasing after the next new thing. They call it ambition, they celebrate it as growth, they worship it as success. But you, no matter how hard you've tried to keep up, know something feels off. That quiet feeling of vertigo that creeps in right after you finally get what you thought you wanted. That strange mix of fleeting satisfaction and renewed emptiness. Like the prize never tastes as sweet as promised. Like every win is just another excuse to want something else. You've been taught to call it freedom, the power to pick from 1,000 different options. Products, paths, lifestyles, versions of yourself. But no one warned you that with so many choices, you might lose yourself. And even freedom, if it doesn't come from the right place, can turn into another kind of prison. More sophisticated, better decorated, more widely admired, but a prison all the same. They told you that you could be whatever you want, have whatever you dream of, go wherever you want. But they didn't tell you that chasing desires, without ever understanding where they come from, might just enslave you to your own hunger. No one taught you to tell the difference between a genuine longing and a disguised deficiency. No one warned you about the danger of looking for yourself outside yourself. And here you are. Sometimes fired up, sometimes totally drained. Sometimes excited for what's next, other times feeling like everything's just the same story with a new wrapper. You want to move forward, but every step seems to take you right back to the same place. A subtle but persistent feeling that something's missing. There's always something missing. It's not your fault. You were born into an era where desire is fueled by algorithms, where identity is built on likes, where what you have means more than who you are. You learned, almost accidentally, that your worth depends on what you can show off. That you only exist if there's proof. That you're only enough if you meet certain endless expectations. So you threw yourself into this silent race where everyone seems to know where they're going, though inside they're just as lost. But there's something in you that resists. Something that, in those rare quiet moments, whispers to you that this isn't freedom. That this chronic exhaustion isn't just physical, it's existential. That this anxiety isn't about what's missing, but about what never really lasts. That part of you, the clearest, truest part, suspects that wanting more isn't always growing. That some desires don't come from abundance, but from fear. That some goals don't expand you, they distract you. That some searches don't connect, but only break you apart. And that, right there, is where the real question starts. What if you stopped chasing more? Not out of resignation, but out of dignity. Not from fear, but from clarity. Who would you be if you let go of the need to prove, to accumulate, to win that invisible race no one ever finishes? Maybe you'll think that's giving up, that it's settling, that it's selling yourself short by refusing to dream. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe letting go of the compulsive more is the only true act of freedom in a world constantly pushing you to feel you're never enough. Because anyone truly at peace with themselves doesn't have to prove anything. No one living authentically needs more to be more. Erich Fromm grasped all this decades ago, when he saw how modernity masked alienation as freedom. How humanity, desperate to escape its inner void, dove headfirst into consumerism, success obsession, and productivity, believing those things would bring freedom. But Fromm saw the disturbing truth. Outer freedom is meaningless without inner liberation. And as long as your desires are driven by fear, lack, or peer pressure, the so-called freedom is just a new form of slavery. It's not that wanting is wrong, or that dreaming is forbidden. It's just that if you never stop to listen for where your desire is actually coming from, you risk spending your whole life chasing things that never belong to you. Ideas that aren't really yours. Versions of success that don't even look like you. And that, no matter how much you dress it up with achievements or recognition, hurts. It hurts as anxiety, as emptiness, as a permanent restlessness, even when everything seems to be going right. And you know this, because you felt it, because you still feel it, because no matter how much you try to talk yourself into being fine, There's a part of you that just doesn't want to keep running after broken promises. What if you took a break, just for a moment? What if you turned down the world's volume long enough to listen to yourself? No filters. What would you discover? Maybe that your worth doesn't depend on how much you have, but on how willing you are to be with yourself, without fear. Maybe you don't need more stimulation, just more silence. Not more goals, just more presence. Not more validation, but more truth. True freedom, the kind you can't buy or brag about, starts when you stop running from yourself. When you choose with awareness, not with panic. When you let go of everything you're supposed to want so you can finally ask yourself, what do I want really? Not what others expect or what's trending, not what some algorithm throws at you, but what do I, from the deepest part of me, actually want without having to put on a show? Maybe that's the start of a different path. Quieter, less applauded, but 100 times more your own. And honestly, maybe, just maybe, that's what freedom really is. You grew up in a world that keeps pushing you not to stop. To always move forward, even if you don't know where you're going. To produce, to prove, to keep advancing. When you do stop, even for a second, something inside you gets restless. Like standing still is a threat. Like resting or not wanting more is the same thing as failing. That's what you were taught, even if nobody ever said it out loud. If you're not growing, you're slipping. If you're not wanting more, you're disappearing. So you learn to fear the pause, to distrust silence, to be suspicious of calm. But calm isn't the problem. The real problem is that noise you're carrying inside. That constant pressure that tells you you're still not enough, still missing something, still not there, even though you're not even sure where there is. The weirdest part is, most of the stuff you're chasing wasn't even your idea. It's just echoes of your parents, your culture, advertising, the endless comparisons with other people. These aren't goals you picked up consciously, just models of success you inherited because you saw them repeated so many times. But the more you chase them, the further you get from yourself. There's a huge difference between desiring from a place of fullness and desiring from a place of lack. When you want something from abundance, you're not trying to fill a hole, you're just expanding a presence that's already there. Your desire doesn't come from fear, it's about authenticity. It's not a matter of needing to exist, but a drive to create because you feel alive. But when desire comes from lack, everything turns into emotional urgency. You're just trying to be somebody because you still don't feel like enough. And that can't be fixed by success, or money, or approval. Because what's broken isn't your outer life, it's your relationship with yourself. That relationship no one taught you how to keep, because the world taught you to look outside. It taught you to measure your worth by your results, your productivity, your image. But it never taught you how to be with yourself. How to sit without doing something. How to look at yourself without judging. How to be quiet without guilt. That's what Fromm was talking about. How internal freedom is lost when people cut themselves off from their own essence. When you become just another cog in the machine that uses you, shapes you, rebrands you as a consumer, so you forget how to just be. He understood there's no real freedom if your desires are manipulated. No fulfillment if you're always chasing things that never quite fill you up. There is a deeper way to exist, but you find it, not by running faster, but by stopping. Stopping isn't failing. Stopping is listening. And when you listen, you realize a lot of things. You see all the times you acted out of fear of rejection. All the paths you took just not to disappoint anyone. All the versions of yourself you invented to get acceptance, to be loved, to avoid being alone. And seeing it can be bittersweet. Some sadness, for all the time spent far from yourself, but also relief because now you finally see it. Seeing honestly is the single biggest act of real freedom. And once you start to see, you start to let go. You let go of the need to impress, the urgency to always be productive, the pressure to live up to expectations you didn't set. And as you let go, space shows up. The space you used to fill with noise, with goals, with outside validation. That space might actually scare you at first, because it brings you face to face with who you really are, bare. But if you stick with it, if you stay put, something new starts to bloom. It's not instant. It's not always comfortable. But it's real. Presence that doesn't need applause. A way of being that doesn't chase approval. A stillness that can't be negotiated away. And in that state, you finally figure out what desires actually belong to you. The ones that come not from emptiness, but from self-love. That don't try to escape, but to settle in. That don't need to be justified by results, because they already make sense. The problem was never desire. The problem was forgetting where your desires came from. And you've always kind of known that, even if you could never quite name it. You knew it in those moments when, after reaching something big, you felt a quick flicker of happiness and then, nothing. That nothing wasn't emptiness. It was your inner voice telling you that wasn't home. That wasn't what you truly wanted. Maybe all that effort wasn't really for you, but for someone else. The bravest thing you can do isn't to keep wanting more. The bravest is to review your own desires. To ask if they still reflect who you are. To question if they still make sense for the person you've become. Because you have changed. And there's no freer feeling than letting yourself grow beyond the mold you once stepped into unthinkingly. Freedom isn't having a million options. Freedom is being able to say, I don't want this without guilt. It's choosing less but with more honesty. It's quitting the crowd and walking with yourself, even if that means being quiet for a while. And if anyone asks why you don't want so many things anymore, you can answer with confidence. Because now I'm choosing for myself, not from what was sold to me. Because I'm not seduced by more anymore, but by better. Because I figured out that the richest thing I can have is peace in my own company. They never taught you that in school. You don't see it in ads. It's not honored with medals. But when you finally find it, everything changes. The noise fades. The anxiety dissolves. Time stops rushing. You start breathing. And you, at last, stop running after something and start walking with yourself. Maybe that doesn't impress anyone. Maybe it won't show up on your resume. But you'll feel it with every breath. In every decision that doesn't come from fear. In every action that's no longer about pleasing, but about simply being. And right there, you found a freedom no one can ever take from you. And if, after all this soul-searching, you realize you didn't need as much as you thought, that you're not as lacking as you were made to feel, that the only thing you ever really needed was permission to be yourself, unfiltered, what would you do with that truth? Maybe it'll sting at first. Facing the mirage you gave all your energy to isn't easy. Self-deception is comfortable because it's familiar, but letting it go is like letting part of you die. Die to expectations, to false safety, to the roles you learned to perform for approval. But that little death is the doorway to a truer life. A quieter, richer, more authentic kind of fullness. The world probably won't stop and cheer for your transformation. It won't celebrate the fact that you live with fewer things but more soul. That you no longer chase everything that glitters because you learned to shine, quietly, from within. In fact, plenty of people will wonder why you've become so different. Why you're not as eager to join the collective chase for more. Some might even feel threatened by your calm. When you find yourself, you remind others of what they're still missing. But still, you won't go back. Because the peace of living truly as yourself is priceless. Because you're no longer willing to mortgage your time, your energy, your essence, for things that used to promise you everything but gave you nothing. Because you get it now. No possession, achievement, or image is worth more than your inner freedom. The real revolution doesn't happen out there. You don't need banners or crowds. It happens quietly in your own consciousness, when you calmly decide to stop begging for validation, stop running just so you won't be forgotten, stop putting on a mask to be loved. This is where everything shifts, when you stop living to live up and start living to feel. You realize you don't want more, you want better. Not speed but depth. Not endless experiences, but richer presence. Not endless accumulation, but connection. And just that clarity changes how you see, choose, and show up in the world. You see that letting go isn't loss, it's maturity. Choosing less isn't scarcity, but precision. Saying, I don't need this, is power. Because real power isn't having it all. It's not needing it all to feel complete. Maybe, in time, you'll find yourself drawn to people who've also chosen a different pace. People who can sit in silence, who aren't defined by their titles, who don't shine through masks, but with genuine presence. And in those connections, Free from pressure, noise, and rivalry, you'll experience something endless craving never gave you: the relief of being accepted, no strings attached. You'll also see that sadness doesn't vanish, but becomes nobler. Uncertainty doesn't disappear, but stops scaring you. Fear still shows up, but doesn't run the show anymore. Because when you stop wanting more out of emptiness, your inner life stops being a battleground and becomes home. From that home, you start living differently. You don't just react, you choose. You don't run, you settle in. You don't force, you flow. It doesn't make you weak or complacent. If anything, it makes you radically clear-headed in a world obsessed with distraction. You're one of the rare ones willing to face what most people run from. Yes, that costs something, but it also brings a gift: the ability to feel deeply, think clearly, love more honestly. Because only when you don't need to impress anyone can you truly love yourself, others, life. Not from urgency, but from presence. Not from attachment, but from freedom. And then, all those little moments, a cup of coffee, a real conversation, a quiet sunset, become extraordinary. Because you're no longer searching for yourself out there, you're living from within. And here's the paradox: when you finally let go of the endless need for more, lots of things just show up naturally. Not because you chased them, but because you stopped getting in your own way. Stopped blocking yourself with expectations, sabotaging yourself with pressures, distancing yourself with judgment. And in that clean, open space, life gets a chance to blossom without having to force it. The abundance you feel now doesn't come from what you achieve, but from what you're able to feel effortlessly. It comes from the connection you have with yourself, something no outside prize can give you. From being able to be quiet without running, to look at your wounds without hiding, to honor your story without shame. You've walked a road no one else can see, but for you, it's changed everything. It's a path with no medals, but with sacred scars. A path not shouted about, but lived through every honest action. A path that can't be taught with words, though others may sense it when they feel your presence. And finally, you get what Fromm meant: that true freedom isn't about choosing from 1,000 products. It's about not needing any of them. It's not about roaming without limit. It's about inhabiting your own life with awareness. It's not about wanting more. It's about being able to look at the world, and at yourself, without needing to have it all to feel alive. You're free when you don't have to be anyone else. Free when you stop chasing yourself. When you can stop and say, "Right here as I am is good." That, said straight from the heart, not from ego, carries more power than any outside victory you ever imagined. And even if you're tempted by more, again, if you catch yourself looking outside for what can only be built inside, don't beat yourself up. Just remember, you know how to come back now. You know the difference between desires that empty you and those that expand you. And even in confusion, that's your protection. It's not about being perfect. It's about being awake. And you are. Maybe not all the time, maybe not without doubts, but you are. And that's enough. You didn't come to this life to fill other people's expectations. You came to remember who you are when you don't need anything to feel whole. And that memory, when you finally embrace it, changes the way you breathe. Because now you don't need to breathe just to get somewhere else. You breathe to stay, to inhabit yourself, to be. And right there, no noise, no fight, no race, you discover something nobody can sell you: the gift of being with yourself without needing more. What if, all this time, it wasn't the world that was stealing your freedom, but you? What if, behind every new want, there isn't a real need, but a trap disguised as a promise? It's easy to think of freedom as something you win in the outside world. Like it's about breaking real chains, defying the system, busting out of visible prisons. But there are more subtle prisons out there, ones that cheer on your growth while secretly locking you up. Because whenever you mistake wanting more for being more, you lose yourself. You swap presence for ambition, calm for anxiety, life for a simulation. And you don't even realize it. They call it progress. But it's not. It's just hunger, a sense of lack, dressed up as success. Sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is want less. Not out of apathy, but out of clarity. Not from resignation, but from dignity. Because there are desires that don't come from the soul, but from pure noise. That aren't rooted in who you are, but in what you're afraid of not being. And that's where your center slips away. Where your truth dissolves. You were taught that wanting more means you're full of life. But nobody told you. It can also be a sign of fear. Fear of emptiness. Fear of silence. Fear of what you'll find if you just stop. And that's where the real drama is, mistaking movement for meaning. Moving ahead just on autopilot, not from real choice. Chasing things you don't need, just because you don't know how to stop. Because stopping honestly feels like dying. But what if life isn't about collecting, but inhabiting? What if what really matters can't be bought, or upgraded, or optimized? The logic of having has colonized the way you love, connect, and even think about yourself. You don't look for deep relationships anymore, just emotional trophies. You don't sit and soak it in, you compare. You don't give thanks, you demand more. And in all this, you lose the ability to actually feel, to give yourself over to life without conditions, to live rooted and open-hearted. That's not progress, it's alienation. The more you want, the less you hear yourself. The more you chase, the less clearly you see. Because unconscious desire just creates more noise, and that noise keeps you from seeing the most fundamental thing. You're not what you want. You're what you choose when you're not driven by fear. And choosing doesn't always mean going further. Sometimes choosing means letting go. Saying no. Quieting yourself. Wanting less so you can be more. You've been made to believe freedom is at the end of the road. That when you finally have enough, when you check off the right boxes, when you get that thing, then, finally, you'll be free. But here's the brutal truth. If you're not free now, while you're still wanting, you won't be free then either. Anyone who needs to get something to feel free is already chained. Already given up their power. Already mortgaged their peace. Real freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the presence of awareness. It's looking your desires in the face and asking, where did you come from? Who do you really serve? Who planted you? What fear are you feeding? Because if you can't answer that, then you're not desiring, you're just repeating. You're stuck in a machine that needs you to never be satisfied, so you'll never slow down. A machine that runs on your chronic discontent. There's a huge difference between wanting from abundance and desiring from emptiness. When you want from abundance, you choose calmly, because you know you already have what matters. When desire is coming from scarcity, you chase with anxiety, because you don't believe you're enough yet. But nobody completes you. Nobody can validate you. No one can give you what you don't give yourself. Sometimes wanting less isn't giving up, it's waking up. It's coming home to yourself. It's remembering who you were before you were convinced you should be someone else. And yeah, returning to yourself is uncomfortable. It confronts you with everything you can't hide. Your holes, your wounds, your masks. But it's still the only road to real freedom. The kind that doesn't depend on what's outside, because it's born inside. That can't be bargained away, because it's yours by right. That doesn't need to be proved, because it already understands everything. You could spend your whole life chasing more. Move cities, change partners, switch goals, shape your body, upgrade your status. And still feel empty. Because it's not about what you achieve, but about what motivates you. Not about what you own, but about who you are when you don't need anything else. Not about running faster, but about asking if you're even heading the right way, or if you're supposed to stop completely. And stopping, in a world that profits off your rush, is a radical act. It's saying no to the noise. It's choosing presence over appearance. It's looking at your life and admitting, this part is mine, and this part is just what everyone else wanted for me. Maybe the freest thing you'll ever do is stop competing. Stop persuading. Stop proving. Just be. Just live in yourself. Accept that maybe what you fear most isn't not having more, but realizing that, even without more, you're actually enough. Because there's no prison worse than the one you decorate with other people's goals. And there's no bigger act of rebellion than wanting less, so you can feel more. Maybe you were never a prisoner of your circumstances. Maybe you've been a prisoner of your idea of success. Of your addiction to wanting. Of that voice that kept telling you there's always something missing. Your freedom might not be somewhere out there at the finish line, But right here, right now, if you just had the courage to stop always wanting more. And maybe, in the quiet that comes when you finally let it all go, you'll hear yourself for the first time. Not the world's echo. Not your inner critic. Just you. Your center. Your truth. That's where it all begins. Not when you have it all, but when you stop needing it.